So, about 5 weeks ago, as of the time of writing, I was added on Discord to the attention of someone on my server asking about the possibility of a top 10 Frontier Elder Dragons, or a countdown on Frontier Mons I would like to see in the main series. Wanting to talk about the plausibility of such videos, while not also wanting to sound too much of an ass, I explained the situation around my playtime and the issues I could run into making them. That being said, I didn't dismiss the ideas entirely, because while responding to the message, I thought of an alternative I could do. And now, here we are. A whole year after wrapping up my personal Frontier arc, diving back to those cold, forsaken waters to plunder for some more hidden treasure. There aren't many rules for this video, honestly. Just me talking about my personal experience with a batch of monsters I had the chance to fight, that also preferably weren't featured in the top 15 favorites because, hey, I already talked about them over there. Which, by the way, if you want a basis before watching this video, check out that two-parter right now. With all that said, let's get started. First up on the chopping block is a very underrated monster. One that always flew under my radar in favor of his bigger, shape-shifting cousin Miru, Duragawa. Introduced in Season 8.0 and a close relative of the Pseudo family, Duragawa is known as the Ice Fox Wyvern, and is primarily fought in the new area that was featured alongside it, the Nest Hole, which doesn't even fully act like a new area. It's just a version of a tower with a new zone featured right here, with your base camp located in Zone 5. As the nickname implies, Duragawa has the capability of utilizing ice in various forms, from breaths that freeze the ground, small tornadoes it creates by whirling its powerful forearms around, as well as a new substatus in the form of Frostbite. When inflicted by Frostbite, hunters will suffer double stamina consumption along the lines of Ice Blight, also losing stamina as if they were in a cold environment without a hot drink. Outside of his elemental capabilities, Duragawa has plenty of other tricks up his sleeve, and was honestly one of the scarier early game monsters we fought from low into high rank. Leaps, claw and body swipes, hip checks, tail slams that create a small cloud of sleep, a terrifying run that puts Tigrex to shame, and even straight up taunting the hunters by sharpening its claws, which was a cool bit of personality I did not expect. Despite my prior lack of expectations, fighting Duragawa was definitely a blast, managing to break from the mold of its brethren while also providing a decent challenge. There was just something really heart-stopping seeing him wind up for his charge and just barely getting out of the way of it. We never fought the G-Rank nor hardcore version after losing to it in high, but it still stuck out positively in our minds. So much so to the point where I even made its armor, which lasted a good while for me up until the end of Gao. If an earlier Frontier monster had to make it into the main series, then this would definitely be one I would offer up. Continuing with the positivity train is a monster that I only ever had the chance to fight once, but do wish I could have done more. Y'all know Astalos, right? Well, imagine now if Astalos had a child with a bird of prey, and that child gathered electrical power instead through the use of sunlight. You would get Toridclaus. You might think I started off this section like that as a joke, but nope. Toridclaus quite clearly took some notes from Astalos in the agility department, which is all fine by me because, hey, Astalos is a good fight to take some notes on. Plus, Torid also does its own thing and changes up these similarities. Just like Astalos, Toridclaus is a flying wyvern that utilizes the element of electricity through a standard as well as a charged mode. Compared to its father though, Toridclaus gathers electricity in a more standard manner, by doing a little charge pose, allowing brave hunters to potentially score some hits in and knock it out. Once charged though, Toridclaus truly embodies the elements of the heavens through its graceful, fast, yet powerful strikes and movements, backed by the fact that Toridclaus has a lot of moves at its disposal, throwing out quills that act like little electro bombs, thunderous slams, breaths, glides, swipes, fast hops and repositions, tail smacks, and even a neat flash bomb like that of Gypsyros. Once he was on the move, it was tricky trying to catch up and hit him, but generally once he was struck, he could easily be flinched to prevent a reposition. Just like his father, however, Toridclaus is a little fragile, barely taking 8 minutes to kill outside of the time dedicated to finding him. Though that might have been added on to what equipment I and the others were doing, which, outside of one of us, was consisting of end of Gal rank equipment. I honestly have no other clue how to describe Toridclaus other than as a fun, fast-paced, lightning-blitzed fight that I regretfully wish I could have fought more. Just like with this entire game. Changing up the pace a little, let's talk about the interesting experience I had with everyone's favorite giant unclassified serpent, Laviente. And yes, I know depending on where you look or who you ask, it will generally be seen as Laviente. However, due to the way the Japanese language works and the various intricacies of it, what would be seen as Laviente for Western audiences is instead spoken as Laviente. Just want to clear that up, okay? Anyways, Laviente is a complex fight involving multiple phases, stages to those phases, player roles, as well as unique systems compared to every other monster in the game. And if you've played through the Call of Taraf and or Safi sieges in World and Iceborne, you have this monster to thank for some of it. Like Kolv and Safi, Laviente's health bar is on a 1 per server basis, meaning that the entire server works together to bring down the beast's health bar through many hunts. Normal and Violent Laviente, the harder high rank version, are focused around 8 people split across 2 groups to deal with, while Berserk, as the G-Rank equivalent, has a whopping 32 players, divided among 8 groups to take it down. For the sake of the video, and due to my experience however, we shall only be covering the original, as that's the only one I got to fight. The Laviente fight takes place through a total of 10 hunts, 9 of which split up into fighting against the beast on 3 separate islands 3 times each, and the final 10th hunt dedicated solely to carving the thing. Yeah, that's how big this thing is. Each of the 3 islands have something unique going on with them, factors that the hunters will have to consider to help them take down this serpent. Island 1 consists of an earthy, mostly standard terrain to get you accustomed to the fight. There is a singular geyser in the center of the island, which can be used by players to avoid incoming attacks due to the difference in altitude. Island 2 is aquatic in nature, prominently covered in water and geysers. At certain intervals in the fight, the player can choose to leave the central island via the geysers, shooting them over to one of these smaller landmasses they can use to chill if they need to get out and heal, or if there is an attack they can't or don't feel confident in avoiding. Island 3 is by far the most hazardous, with thick smoke from the springs that can fog up your vision, and pools on the ground that can become acidic. Throughout each island, each phase of the fight, Laviente learns different, stronger attacks that can be extremely tough to avoid, surely killing you and if not knocking down your health by quite a bit. Points are earned throughout the entire ordeal by completing various tasks, generally consisting of clearing the phases as well as breaking parts. The higher the points, the greater the chance you are rewarded these Laviente gems for all of your troubles. Gems and materials that are, of course, used to make his gear, but you also have to use the points you get when making and upgrading the weapons. On top of all of this, there's systems involving support skills and roles, a balloon store with the NPC here for items, a different quest failed criteria, and more. If it wasn't for the official Frontier Fist.moe site, I wouldn't have even known some of these mechanics exist. Which, side note, If you want an accurate source of information when it comes to Frontier, one that goes in depth about progression, various monsters and their gimmicks, in-game events, systems, and more, please, for the love of Kulu, check out the fist.moe site. It is an invaluable resource to anyone wishing to learn more about Frontier or even discuss it. Link is of course down in the description below. With all these systems behind it, Laviente certainly makes a case for being perhaps one of the most unique fights in the entire franchise. But what did I feel about the Endeavor? It was... The fight from a spectacle side is awe-inspiring, providing a lot of eye candy even now considering the time when it was first released. There's just something really terrifying about seeing this creature casually sliver and dig its way through and around an island, creating massive ground fissures, tectonic activity, and even a volcanic eruption all the while. A terror that strikes at my core way harder than the likes of Dalamadur, personally speaking, especially when factoring Violent and Berserk, whose metabolism and hunger makes Devil Joe blush. It is also mechanically rich, evoking a certain methodology and communication style to even fight. Getting up close and actually confronting the beast, however, it was nauseating to say the least. A big problem I have with this fight comes down to the size of the monster, which, while certainly impressive, makes fighting it so much harder. Because as a Blade Master, I have to get right up to the serpent's massive body in order to even hit. A spot that, while easy and reliable to hit, makes it extremely hard to see, hear, and respond to Laviente's attacks, many of which are foreshadowed by his upper body. An upper body that you can't snap too quickly if you are busy smacking that stomach. Oh, what's that sound mean? Well, I don't know, because as I try to respond and see what it is, I get shocked by a paralysis wave that rolls throughout his entire body, sometimes hitting me multiple times in a row. What attack is he doing now? Well, I certainly found out, but only because I got hit by a chain of explosions that also follow throughout his entire body. Combine that with the damage some of these moves can do, potentially killing me outright, and add up all the hunts, the carving quest, his health, as well as the time in between to sign up for the next stage, making the entire Laviente fight last for an hour and 22 minutes, and yeah, it's no wonder it falls victim to the classic blunders that a lot of other large siege battles also falter from. Not the worst siege fight I've gone through, that honor would still go to either Lau or Zora, but definitely not the best. So, remember how just a few moments ago I said that Laviente is up there as a contender for one of the most unique fights in all of Monster Hunter? Well, that still stands. But the elusive ancient octopus of the skies, Yama Kurai, might have something to say about that. Yama Kurai was introduced in Monster Frontier G8 as an origin species to Yamasukami, the term for a new monster that has a closer ancestral link to a monster we already know of. Monsters that also fall into this category include Vol'jane, Toa Tsukatora, and Gorei Demosu. Fought at the very top of the storm-ridden highlands, Yama Kurai is noticeably more aggressive compared to its descendant, staying just barely out of reach of most hunters and bombarding them with sleep or poison-covered tendrils, drifts, slams, and even a massive suck that fortunately doesn't one-shot you like with Tsukami. At least, most of the time, considering that this suck-up also stacks poison on top of the damage. Its attunement with nature is further enhanced from the original not just in design, but also in the thunderbugs that live within its mouth and the flora growing on it. At a moment's notice, Yama Kurai can throw out seeds from its back and rapidly accelerate the growth of the plant to the point where they reach adulthood and death in mere seconds. and when it truly feels like its life is in danger, the leaves and plant life will turn a bright autumn orange, growing more aggressive with its attacks. The giant cephalopod does of course get more moves in G rank, which you are seeing right now by someone else because I never got to fight the G rank equivalent. Damn you, GR requirement. Now, taking all that into consideration, how do you fight it? Well, what you can do is boot up Ocarina of Time, get to the final fight with Ganondorf, and bam, there's your answer. Nope, I'm not making this shit up, guys. The strategy of this fight is to literally hit the thunderbugs he spews out, as well as anything else like the seeds, back at him. Once enough of the objects hit him, he falls down to the ground stunned, allowing you the chance to go in before he floats back up. Of course, you can try to take potshots at the tendrils, especially if you have a weapon or skin with a longer reach, but this is the most reliable and arguably more fun method to the fight. This unorthodox Zelda flavor makes Yama Kurai one of the most bizarre monsters I have ever faced, bar none, and it is for that reason that he stands out so much. He's like that guy at the local party that is so weird and standoffish in his mannerisms that people seem to avoid him, but have the time and kindness to talk with him, and you get to know the guy for how cool and wacky his party tricks are. A weirdo in the best way possible. And now, capping off this small gathering of monsters we have here, the Crystal Scorpion Akura Vashimu and Jabia finally makes a debut on this channel. As one of the OG monsters to Frontier, introduced all the way back in Season 3.0, this pair might be one of the most recognizable monsters of the Frontier catalog alongside Espidus. This popularity doesn't just extend to the Frontier subsection, however, as it seems to have attracted its fair share of attention even in the public eye. And for good reason, I say. How the main series hasn't had the idea to make a scorpion monster yet, I have no idea. Much less a crystal scorpion. It's such a simple, elegant design, and I just love the coloration of these two monsters so much. I'll give even more credit to these monsters as the progenitor of a crystallization debuff that a few other monsters use. Crystallization, for those of you who don't know, is a status unique to Frontier where, after getting hit by a certain attack, covers the hunters in stamina sapping crystals. Not only do these crystals drain the stamina bar to the lowest it can be, but they also begin growing and, with enough time, explode if they aren't shaken off quick enough. For Jabia and Vashimu, the effects come in the form of either sprays from the tail, or bombs they deposit by ripping the crystal off, whether by throwing it like a damn grenade, or laying it there like a mine you can use. Outside of the status though, the Akuras have plenty of other attacks befitting their scorpion visage. From tail stabs and sweeps, to paralyze foes in their tracks, charges, spins, claw swipes, and in the case of Jabia, leaps and swings that cover a 360-degree range. All in all, a pair of extremely solid monsters with really cool design and theme going for them. However, there is one element to this group that makes them stand out quite a bit. One that, for those not in the know, is absolutely bonkers. The method for cutting their tails. So, to run it from the top, in order to cut off Vashimu's tail, you first need to use an impact weapon in order to knock off the crystals on his head and arms. Once the crystals have been broken off, you then need to use a cutting weapon to the broken parts, tearing off the skin and thereby bits of crystals remaining. Each time you are successful with that cut break, the monster will be flipped over onto its back in this cute little animation. And it is only from that third flip over where you can finally cut the tail off. Jabia is much the same process until the point where you have to break the head and pincers again. Where now, not only do you have to break those free with cutting weapons, but you also need to use an impact weapon on the tail to get red veins to appear. And only then can you cut off its tail. Plus, after all of that, you will then need to make sure the scorpions don't try to eat their own tails in order to recover health. Else, you will lose the carves you could have gotten. What? Was there just some guy on the design team who was high one night and, wanting to reinvent the wheel, decided to make this really wacky and obscure method to cut these monsters' parts at a point in time where weapons like Tonfa, Magnet Spike, or Charge Blade didn't exist, thus requiring multiplayer teamwork across multiple weapons to get that done? Because if so, I really dig it. If there's anything that I've learned after the over 10-year journey I've had with this game, from being a simple spectator to an active participant for even just a short amount of time, it is that a key idea of Frontier was taking risks and pushing the envelope at the time. An idea that wasn't just formed out of the blue to be, wow, wacky and crazy, look at all these spikes and ridiculous attacks, woohoo! In the later years of its life like many think, much less like that. No, it was a philosophy ingrained into the very roots of the project to take a step in the direction that the main series of the time, and even now to a degree, wouldn't do. Monsters, concepts, themes, behaviors, and more that you wouldn't see anywhere else. Espinus to this day remains as a bizarre footnote of passive aggressivity. A monster so indifferent to you at first, but it just sleeps the entire time. Because I mean, look at it! Why would it care about you when it is that heavily armored, poisonous, and powerful enough to be considered equal in threat to elder dragons? And unlike a certain someone in a recent game, can actually walk the walk. Pariah Paria to this day remains one of a kind, as a monster with an entire minigame, so to speak, surrounding the use of meat and its vomit to get more rewards. The Akuras remain one of a kind, not just due to their nature as scorpion monsters, but also with their out there yet ingenious tail-cutting method. Yama Kurai remains one of a kind due to the unorthodox, some could argue, not Monster Hunter style you have to approach with. Even if the approach might not work out the best like with that of Laviente, the staying power and more importantly, impact these ideas have had on the main series remain eternal. Not just in the monsters, but in other areas such as armors, skills, systems, styles, and more. There is more to Frontier than what it appears to be, much less from what some people might try and tell you. And even if you might not be the most positive about Frontier, I implore you to try and put those feelings behind you and dig deeper with this odd game. To look at the intricacies and all that it does, to research and ask around with various trusted sources and people, and to understand why it has had such a massive impact on not just the franchise, but this small, humble player base. It truly was an unforgettable experience. And so, this has been my small list, talking about 5, technically speaking 6 monsters from Monster Hunter Frontier. There's a whole slew I could have talked about, some of course having less time than others due to the time frame I had to play the game, and some I've already talked about. But I wanted to expand upon monsters I never brought up before, and more importantly, show to people the aspects that lie hidden for many. Monsters that, perhaps, get overshadowed by the stigma of later Frontier. Monsters that, quite simply, aren't talked about as much compared to the other, more popular choices everyone likes to talk about. But hey, if you people would be up for another one of these, shedding more light on some potentially underrated monsters, or hell, even just my thoughts on monsters I have fought, let me know down in the comment section below. I'd definitely be up for another one, and I really do enjoy talking about Frontier and the precious, if short time I had with it. With all that said, I have been the Monarch of Dragons, and I hope you all have a fantastic day/night, wherever you live. Peace.